So welcome everybody. This is ICUJP on October 4, 2024. We welcome every one of you who's here in person and watching a rebroadcast of this program. I had ICUJP withdrawal for a few weeks. I was away for several Fridays. I was so thrilled to see the announcements and the programming and the speakers, and everything continue seamlessly with the help of Rick and so many others on the board. The only thing I'll say about my trip to Athens and Istanbul and Turkey and Greece and the islands there is lessons that democracies have no guarantee of lasting forever. And the history there demonstrates that, and it should make us even more vigilant and deliberate. And I mean democracy in the fullest sense of protecting people's rights and individuality and human dignity. Those were lessons learned and unlearned over the last thousands of years. We live in our own moment, and it is worth remembering history because we are making it literally every day. So we are ICUJP, and I want to welcome everybody. We do important work. We've been doing it for 23 years. In the announcement you got for today's program, there are two important things. There is a link to the extraordinary celebration last month of George Regas in our Courageous Peacemaker Awards event. And we're very grateful for everybody who was present, who supported that event. Photographs and videos of key moments will be forthcoming. But if you missed the event and you like what you see on Friday mornings and you want to continue to enjoy programs like the one we're about to have, please donate to ICUJP. The announcement gives you a whole range of ways that you can donate in the modern era, although I noticed that some folks write a check and mail it in. So please be as generous as you can. We have a small part-time paid staff. It does take money to present these programs and do the work we do throughout the year. The live presentations, Close Guantanamo in January, and programs throughout the year. I'm grateful, and we are grateful for everything you do to support our work. I would like to turn now to Carol Francis for her reflection.
All right. Thank you. And thanks, Chris. Yeah, I know it's a few days before the anniversary of the terrible year, beginning of the terrible year in the Middle East. Towever, since you all know how I feel about that, I'm instead going to, since today is my Saint's Day, and it will be 28 years before it will come around again on a Friday. So I'm reflecting on my patron saint. When I was a very little girl, I read a story about St. Francis in which he blessed the birds, and in response, they flew over him in a formation of a cross, blessing him. As a very little girl, that was the most wonderful story because I love birds too. As I grew older, I began to question whether that had actually happened. But that didn't change my love for the man or for the story because it celebrates the deep spiritual connection he had with nature. Later, I learned that how Francis, the son of a wealthy fabric merchant, went up to his father's storeroom and threw fabric out to the people below. I like this rejection of personal wealth. And of course, I love this very true story about his embrace of a man with leprosy. In high school, in my preparation to receive the sacrament of confirmation, asked to choose a saint's name for myself, I of course picked Francis. Yet it never really hit me that he not only loved animals, but also people. Until as a young woman, I watched Franco Zeffirelli's Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. I was surprised that I had never before seen this in him, like that he, like Jesus, was one who loved being among the poor. What was most remarkable about him, I realized, was how joyously he indulged in his poverty. Then I found Nikos Kazantzakis' novel, St. Francis. One segment I especially loved was this: when young Francis and a friend listened to a caged canary. "The canary is like man's soul," he whispered. Finally, it sees bars around him, but instead of despairing, it sings. It sings, and wait and see, Brother Leo. One day its song shall break the bars. The other story I remember from the novel is one in which people of Assisi, hearing the town's bell ringing in the middle of the night, hurried outside, prepare to hear about an invasion from another town or a fire or some such horror. When Francis in the bell tower had them all gathered together, he said, "The moon, look at the moon." Now, even if these two stories never happened outside of Kazantzakis' imagination, I love Francis for inspiring them. These stories are the essence of him. And by the way, also for inspiring one of the best popes ever to take his name, the first one to do so. I told Paula, my best friend, about Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. We found it on cassette and watched it together. Afterwards, she said to me, "Now I understand why you love Francis." Later, she brought me Reluctant Saint, The Life of Francis of Assisi. The book is full of this source says this, but that source says that. This source has this bias and this. But I found it fascinating. And later, I more recently read Paul Moses' book, The Saint and the Sultan, and watched the companion documentary about the friendship between Francis and the Sultan Malik al-Kamil, whom he met by going on the Fifth Crusade, hoping to end the violence, and how this friendship affected both of them, and potentially all of us. Fairly early in my adult years, I learned that the essence of traditional indigenous culture is their spiritual connection with nature. I was stunned with the thought, oh, Francis was a white Indian. These things keep alive my love for him and my celebration of October 4th as this feast day, not only based on documented facts, but also on the mythologies that he inspired. May we all find some way to share his joy today.
Wow, thank you, Carol Francis, very, very much. I can see why you chose this day to give that reflection. And I have Reluctant Saint on my bookshelf right now.
I also want to share one little story. I was in Assisi, and I went to the magnificent basilica dedicated to St. Francis. But what really interested me was the story of why it was there. when St. Francis was dying, he was asked where he wanted to be buried. And there was a place where they buried people who were criminals, people who were not able to be buried in the Catholic cemetery. And he said, that's where I want to be buried, with all of those people. So, as a result, the place where the criminals were buried and Francis was buried is now the most sacred place in Assisi.
Wow.
He totally got Jesus's message.
Wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you.
I never heard that one. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, neither.
It is October 4. Monday is October 7. ICUJP has devoted the last year to an extraordinary series of programs on peace and justice in the Middle East. We've had some sad and heartbreaking opportunities to meet people whose families have been decimated in Gaza. We've devoted a lot of attention to that program. Coming a year forward, it so reminds me of 9/11 here in the United States, when under the care of George Regas, we understood that the United States had a choice to make after the attacks on 9/11. And we took the wrong path, and we've been paying for it ever since. And ICUJP has been addressing that ever since for the last 23 years. In my mind, after October 7, Israel took the wrong path, and the Palestinian people are paying for that every day. I have no preview of Stephen Fiske's remarks today, but I have a feeling much of what he says will speak to that. Stephen is a long-time friend of mine, a friend of ICUJP, a board member, an inspiration to many of us because of how he has blended his ministry with his music. He has been the backbone of so many wonderful moments when ICUJP met in person, celebrating his lyrics and music, and giving all of us a boost every time he did so. He took a new path, and I have a feeling we'll hear some autobiographical insights about Stephen's life, including right up to now living in the state of Virginia. So, Stephen, we welcome you, and we're eager to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Steve. And hello, everybody, and welcome. It's always great to be here, part of ICUJP. And on this day, thank you, Father Ponette, for reminding us of the birthday of St. Francis, who has always been an inspiration for me. And that beautiful prayer of St. Francis, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, has been a backbone of my life and my course in music and poetry and filmmaking and so forth. So this is a day where I'm happy to be presenting to all of you. First, a little bit of background about myself. I was born in New York City in a place called Washington Heights. Our apartment building, our family apartment building, was right next to the George Washington Bridge. And from my bedroom window, I saw the bridge, I saw the Hudson River, and that bridge was probably the first strong imprint in my life, visual imprint of connecting distant shores and being a bridge across differences. My mom was an opera singer. I literally grew up in the womb of music. Mom vocalized every day without fail. She went up and down the scales of our big upright piano in our living room and she had a accompanist who came over, and she was preparing for her next presentation, her next concert. She was with different opera groups on tour and singing in various churches. So my family would go wherever mom was singing at a church as a guest soloist, usually a church with a big choir. And that was my first exposure to church, but I found it boring, to be frank, and just really wanted to get out of there and play ball. I was a ball player, nut, and that's all I wanted to do, was play ball. And so athletics became a big part of my life growing up in the schoolyards and playgrounds of New York. And also Washington Heights is part of just being north of Harlem. I would go down and play basketball quite often in Harlem. And it was there in the streets of New York that I found the racial divide. It was very, very prevalent. My father was a writer, a editor, worked for Western Electric Corporation in New York City, which was the parent company to Bell Telephone. He got up every morning, put on a suit and tie, carried an attaché case, went to the subway, and went down to the office. We had breakfast with him. He would read the New York Times and talk to us about current events. And mom was a activist, a community activist, president of the PTA, involved with rental rights. And so I grew up in a very creative family, encouraged the arts and encouraged creative expression. And I was a natural at singing and participating in school plays, and carried that through high school and into college. It was in college that I was in a musical comedy group in City College of New York, and that's where I met my wife, Nikki, and we've been married together for over 50 years now. And I can happily say we're still in love with each other. So I became involved in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. In high school, I went to the High School of Music and Art, where it was a very activist school, a very progressive school. I learned to be a folk singer, sing the songs of freedom, the songs of the civil rights movement, the songs of the folk era. And in 1963, after participating in a couple of marches in New York, I went to Washington, D.C., and was in attendance for the Great March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave the I Have a Dream speech. And that was a very strong imprint in my life, because I realized at that march that it was the people who make a difference in this world, the people who take it upon themselves to be activists and interventionists and do what has been said, getting into good trouble. So that led me to become an activist and also an environmentalist. I don't know, Rick, if you're able to pull up that video.
Freedom Now movement, hear me. We are requesting all citizens to move into Washington, to go by plane, car, bus, any way that you can get there. Walk if necessary. We are pushing for jobs, housing, desegregated schools. This is an urgent request. Please join. Go to Washington.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to
summer day, 1963. The great march for civil rights took on Washington, D.C. They marched for freedom, they marched for jobs, they marched for dignity. Marched for the conscience of a nation, for justice and equality. 250,000 gathered there in Washington that day. Hear the Reverend Dr. King lift his voice and say, I have a dream, and we witnessed history. Now it's up to all of us to carry the legacy. So we're saying, we carry the dream of the way this world could be. We carry the dream of justice and equality. When we gather together, we find strength and unity. Yeah, we carry the dream. All people shall be free. From the streets of Birmingham to that Nobel Prize he won, Reverend King let freedom ring, shines his light for everyone. Now people anywhere who've been denied their rights find vision, strength, and inspiration to carry on the fight. So we're saying, we carry the dream of the way this world could be. We carry the dream of justice and equality. When we gather together, we find strength and unity. Yeah, we carry the dream. All people shall be free.
The people, united, will never be divided.
You can't keep a baby from needing to be touched and loved. You can't keep the trees from reaching for the sky above. And you can't stop the river from rolling to the sea. And you can't keep the people from the hunger to be free. So we're saying, we carry the dream of the way this world could be. We carry the dream of justice and equality. When we gather together, we find strength and unity. Yeah, we carry the dream. All people shall be free. Shall be free. Shall be free. All people shall be free. We carry the dream. 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 Peace and justice. We carry the dream. Equality. We carry the dream. Human rights. We carry the dream. We carry the dream. We carry the dream.
I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Are we back online?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good.
Wow, Stephen.
Yeah, powerful.
Well, thank you. Well, that's a big part of my life, is that moment, that day, that march, and carried through to becoming a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. Of course, Dr. King spoke out strongly against the war, and after college, I went to New York University. I went to New York University on a basketball scholarship. And then after school, I filed for conscientious objector status, counseled by the American Friends Service Committee, a group that was counseling young men who were facing the draft. And I came to California. I was through the American Friends Service Committee. I was able to basically delay the process of becoming a conscientious objector, although internally I made a covenant within myself that I would live a life of nonviolence. And so came out to California. I joined the rock and roll band and realized after 2 years of being in an acid rock band that was not the direction I wanted to take. And I was longing for spiritual, a spiritual direction for my life. And I met a guru named Swami Satchidananda at a retreat in 1971. And it seemed to me that he was the embodiment of what I had learned through the American Friends Service Committee, because I had begun to study Gandhi and Gandhi's philosophy of satyagraha, of nonviolence. And Swami Satchidananda seemed to be a living embodiment of ahimsa, which is doing no harm to any living thing and treating all of life with respect and with dignity. And then eventually I moved to Los Angeles with my wife, of course, and I found ICUJP. And when I first came to ICUJP, around the table was George Regas, James Lawson, Mayor Hartut, Rabbi Bierman, Rabbi Jacobs, Grace Dearness, Pat Cromer, Lydia Lopez, so many others. And of course, Steve Rhodey was there. And that group just seemed to me like a place where I wanted to put a lot of my time and energy behind. And so ICUJP has been another big part of my life. But before I go on with the program that I'm going to speak of today, I want to say that basically what I'll be talking about is kind of a historical overview, discussing what I would call disease of history. And the disease of history is that of, perhaps it's a new term, predatorialism, or healing the predatorial tendency of human beings. And first, I want to tell you a couple of short stories. The first one is a story of two children in a sandbox. One is a young girl, maybe 3.5 to 4 years old, and she has a Tonka toy with her, one of those yellow Tonka toy trucks. And she's playing in the sand, in the sandbox. And the Tonka truck, you can lift up the back of it and dump out the sand. And then there's another boy, a young boy in the sandbox, and he's a little older. He's maybe 4, a little bigger. And he's got a pail and a shovel, but he's got his eye on that Tonka toy. That Tonka toy really interests him. Meanwhile, the two moms are sitting on a bench nearby, and they're engaged in conversation with each other. And while they're engaged in conversation with each other, the little boy comes over and basically takes the Tonka truck as his own and starts playing with it. And the little girl begins to be upset and she starts to cry. And then the mothers intervene. And in their interventions, the mothers are basically saying, stop the bullying, stop the fighting, don't put dirt in your mouth. The boy's got some sand in his mouth. Share, learn how to share, and be nice. That's the mom's advice to the two children in the sandbox. Keep that in mind, because I'll be talking a little bit about that as we go forward. The second story is a story that takes place in the city of Jerusalem. And after Israel had been founded, there was a father and son who would go to the Western Wall every day to pray. And after the father died, the son continued the legacy of going to the wall every day to pray. And one day, a woman who had seen him going to the wall to pray asked him, "Hey, kind sir, I see you go to the wall without fail every day to pray. What do you pray for?" And he said, "I pray for peace." And she said, "Oh, okay. Well, how does that make you feel?" And he says, "I feel like I'm talking to a wall."
Hmm.
And so, you know, in many ways, that's the plight of the peacemaker, that there is somehow a wall that has been erected that prevents us from getting to that place where we carry the dream, where we know that our place here on this planet is to live in peace. But we've been suffering from a disease of history. And James Lawson described it pretty well. I went to many workshops with Jim over the years, and he discussed racism, sexism, classism, militarism, and I would add to that environmental destructionism and predatory capitalism. And predatory capitalism, of course, derives from plantation capitalism, where the white predator male overseer was the person who was the predator of the enslavement of those who were brought from Africa and were the ones who were the backbone of the American economy in the colonial times. But that predatorialism, if I may coin a term, predatorialism, to me is the disease of history. That in all those racism, sexism, classism, militarism, environmental destructionism, and predatory capitalism, we have been plagued by the disease of predatorialism. And predatorialism derives, I believe, from the primal times of human beings in our evolutionary stages, where we grew up in the wilds of the jungle, where we were forced as a coping mechanism to survive and to be secure, to be predatorial. We had to hunt. We had to kill. The law of the jungle is basically hunt or be hunted, kill or be killed. And as Darwin explained it, survival of the fittest. But survival of the fittest is not just survival of the biggest, the strongest, the fastest. It is the ability to adapt to the changes of habitat. And while human beings have adapted over the centuries from the history of being migrants to being agriculturalists and domesticating animals, and then through the Industrial Revolution and into today's modern age, we have failed to remove ourselves from that predatorial syndrome of being the hunter and taking prey. And this is what we continue to do today. That the predator was the animal, the lion, the tiger, the wolf, the jackal, that would target its prey, chase it down, pounce upon it, kill it, and devour it. But the animal had no choice. That's the way the animal was built and designed. Its digestive system was designed to digest raw meat and sinew and organs and bones and so forth. But human beings do not have claws. We do not have those fangs. We do not have that digestive system. We don't have those four legs that give the great speed of the predator animals. We have two legs. We're bipedal creatures. We are created for a different destiny on this planet, a different destiny. And part of our destiny is to heal ourselves from the disease of predatorialism. Now, one of the ways that the predator maintains this disease is through what social psychologists have given as an acronym, DARVO, D-A-R-V-O. The D stands for deny, deflect, delay, and dismiss. The A stands for attack, anger, get angry, accuse. You see this in Trump or in Kavanaugh when he was at the hearing. He was attacked for his predatorship of women. But at first he denied. And then the next day he came back and he attacked. This is part of DARVO. And then the R in DARVO, D-A-R-V-O, the R stands for reversal. Reverse the charges. You call me a racist, you're the racist. It also stands for retaliation and revenge and becoming reactive, DARVO. And the V stands for being the victim. I'm the victim of a witch hunt. They're after me. And it also stands for vengeance, to take vengeance on your accusers. And the O stands for going on a full offensive to obfuscate, obscure, and obliterate whoever it is that is trying to accuse you or trying to blame you or trying to bring justice to what is a lie or what is false. And this cognitive dissonance that happens becomes the defense mechanism of DARVO, the denying mechanism of DARVO. And this is the way addictive behavior and narcissism is protected by these techniques. And we see it, of course, in Trump. So this talk is about healing the predatorship or healing the predatorialism that has plagued our history. We as human beings do not need to be predators. That's a learned behavior. It can be unlearned. And so I want to talk about how we get to that point of healing the predator. And of course, we can listen to the great teachers, the teachers of wisdom, like St. Francis, or like Jesus, or like the great rabbis of the past, or any of the great teachers of any of the religions. The Golden Rule, which is taught in all religions in various different ways. But basically, to me, the healing of the predator begins with the healing of our consciousness. That it's an evolution of consciousness where we realize that we have to move from the narrative of separateness. And the narrative of separateness is where we see the world as divided, disconnected, and dissonant. And moving from that mindset to the narrative of wholeness, which is where we see the world as interconnected, interdependent, and integral. This is wholeness. And that the 21st century, where we're coming up against this existential realization that our history, and if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat its failures, that our history must now be changed, and this century must bring the ending of the patriarchal dominance, the ending of predatorialism. Now, how do we do that? How do we get there? Well, a number of ways. One way, for me, when I decided to become a nonviolent person, was to change my diet and to become a vegetarian. Because we see in the factory food industry how we are committing genocide against our animal cohabitants of this planet. And as long as we're doing that, as long as we're eating the meat and the blood of our animal friends, we are complicit in genocide on this planet. So there has been a strong movement for vegetarianism. I became a vegetarian in 1970, and I have eaten no meat at all. I have, I confess that I'm not vegan in the sense that I do eat occasionally some ice cream and drink some milk and have some yogurt and so forth. But I think if we can move away from the violence of the factory food industry, that's one way right at our kitchen table where we can heal the predator. The second way of healing the predator is to embrace the principles of nonviolence. And Interfaith Communities United for Peace and Justice is an organization that at its core embraces the principles of nonviolence. And I just want to go over a few of those principles for us today as a reminder. And the first one is to see the world as a oneness. There's a unity in the oneness, in the wholeness of all of life, that all of life is interconnected, that the universe is a unity that embraces a rich diversity where there's nothing so great or so small that it does not in some way interact with itself. And so if we really knew that, we would do nothing to harm our planet, to harm each other, because we're only harming ourselves. We're only being predators of ourselves. The second principle of nonviolence is that of ahimsa, which is a term that comes from the Sanskrit. And it means doing no harm to any living thing or to the planet. Embracing nonviolence in thought, word, and deed. The third principle of nonviolence is love, to embrace love in heart and mind, and to do nothing that deprecates someone else, denies someone else, stigmatizes, marginalizes other human beings, that all human beings are worthy of the honoring and the respect and the dignity of our love. The fourth principle of nonviolence is that of purification and forgiveness. That by embracing love, by embracing ahimsa, that by embracing the unity of all existence, we are also in the process of purifying ourselves and ridding ourselves of the disease of the predator. And the predilection of human beings to dominate, to oppress, to basically kill and engage in the insanity of war and militarism. So nonviolence becomes a purification of our consciousness, a purification of our heart, and a purification of our action which reflects that purification and leads us to forgiveness. Jesus said on the cross, "Forgive them, they know not what they do." And so we see so much in this world that requires our forgiveness. And then in order to get to that forgiveness, in order to get to that love and that unity, we have to learn how to manage and resolve conflicts, to be fully informed on all aspects of an issue, so that we become educated and we don't engage in creating enemies. And one of the principles of nonviolence is that those who we treat as enemies, we're seen as, when the individual is not the enemy. That they're only actors acting out a script. The script of predatorialism is a script that has been learned from the primal days of having to learn how to survive in the wild of the wilderness, to hunt, to kill. And we don't need to do that anymore, not in this 21st century, for our own survival as a planetary people. We must amend the predatorialism and the making of enemies. We have to learn how to restrain our reactivity, our response to others, so that we don't respond in kind. One of the principles of nonviolence is you don't heal, you don't amend things by just repeating the violence that has been perpetrated upon us. There is another way. There is another way that us human beings can move beyond predatorship, beyond winning and losing, beyond predator and prey. See the goodness in all people, and learning that the power of nonviolence is a stronger power than the power of weaponry and the power of the insanity of war making. And that the true power of a human being comes from being able to draw from diverse directions, from diverse perspectives, and bring these perspectives together into a new vision, a new whole. And so that requires removing the predatorship. And then interfaith is a big part of that. Because in the interfaith movement, we're building bridges across differences, where we are not seeing that we are enemies and that we need to resolve our conflicts through violence. We learn also to be activists, to get in the way. And choosing the interfaith path is the path of building bridges across differences, across different shores, where we can amend and heal the disease of being predators. And we see this disease of predatorship in racism, sexism, classism, militarism, environmental destructionism, predatory capitalism, the narrative that comes from basic primal assumptions that human beings are predatory, that the masculine, that the male is dominant over the female, that men are a superior gender, that war and violence is a way to settle disputes, that one race is superior to another race, the blindness to truth, where we overcome the cognitive dissonance and we realize that we are an evolving species. We can move to a higher consciousness where we don't engage in this violent behavior, and where militarism and violence is no longer needed. This is carrying the dream that Martin Luther King brought, but that we can't seem to get to because we're so stuck in these primal motivations. So embracing wholeness, embracing vegetarianism, embracing nonviolence, and earth stewardship is a key part of all of this, where we see the earth that we live on, as Native Americans have always proclaimed, and all indigenous people proclaim, the earth is our mother. We must protect her. We must take care of her. Instead of raping, pillaging, extracting, and exploiting, being predators of our own mother, predator of the earth. This is key to our evolution as a species, to finding our peace, finding that wholeness, finding that understanding of who we are as human beings. We are not violence. We are not hatred. We are not this predatorial creature where we're constantly creating a prey to extract, to exploit, to devour, to kill, and to dominate over. This is the evolution of human consciousness. It's a cultural evolution where we learn to love each other and we learn to treat each other with respect. So we as human beings have this great choice at this time in history, in this 21st century, to evolve past this predatorialism, to evolve past this learned behavior. So this is basically the message that I want to bring. We are capable. We are capable of making this world a place that works for everyone. And that democracy evolved out of the struggle of this world history, which in its purest form recognizes and respects the right of each individual to choose the life that they would want to live within democracy. And that our democracy is where the end of predatorialism can take place. But we chose, as a symbol of democracy, the predatorial image of the eagle. Benjamin Franklin wanted us to choose the turkey. Turkey was the wild animal that was so present throughout the wilderness of the colonial America and fed so many people, was the bird of Thanksgiving. But we chose instead the predator. We chose the eagle. But now we have another choice. We have another choice to make at this. We stand on the existential precipice of a world where our environment has been decimated, polluted, and where we as a species are learning. The environmental movement is teaching us to be earth stewards. And this is an essential part of the process of ending the predatorial predisposition. So if we can embrace all these aspects and move ourselves in our heart and in our soul towards the consciousness of being loving, kind, generous human beings, respecting the great diversity of all existence, and knowing that in that great diversity is our power, it is our strength, that the power of the human being, that we live in the Anthropocene era, where the human beings are the dominant creatures on the planet now. And as the dominant creatures on the planet now, we have the opportunity to make this place a heaven on earth, should we decide to overcome the predatorial aspects that has been such a big part of our history, to embrace wholeness, to embrace earth stewardship, to become activists for peace and justice, which is why this organization is so important, to come to the balance of masculine and feminine, and to learn how to communicate in ways that we can overcome our differences respectfully and with dignity, in nonviolent communication, in conflict resolution methodologies, which is part of the nonviolent way of living. So that's basically the gist of what I wanted to say today. And I've learned in the course of being a communicator that the greatest wisdom comes in the dialogue, in the sharing of different people, in taking a good look at ourselves and learning from each other. We're all the teachers of each other. I'm thankful for those teachers, saints and sages who brought their wisdom to this world throughout the ages, who taught of peace and justice, of love and kindness, and to look beyond the blindness, beyond the fear, the war, and the hatred, right down to the sacred, down to the heart and soul, where we know we're born in God's image, that we are whole. We are whole. So I want to conclude with a poem. It is a prayer in a way, and then enter into the dialogue. Can we really know peace in this world of distress? Is peace just a fool's wish that poets address? Are we hopelessly bound by war's travesty? Or can we rise to a new destiny? Has not history's rampage of war made it clear that the quest for peace is the new frontier? That the makers of peace are the true pioneer? Be steady, be sure in the power of peace. Let the power of peace within you increase. While the world swirls around you in turmoil and strife, draw deeply each breath of the blessings of life. Drink deep from that well that heals and renews what seems so hard to find, so easy to lose. Draw forth the power, the strength to persevere, to stand in the truth, to step through the fear, to know without doubt, steadfast, without sway, that war is no answer, that peace is the way. Be wise to the madness of the war maker's worldview. Forgive them their trespasses. They know not what they do. Be wise, based in love and nonviolent will, true to the commandment, thou shalt not kill. When the war winds have died and the battlefield still, There's a destiny of peace yet to fulfill. There's a calling worldwide for this peace revolution that marks a sea change in human evolution, where dignity and justice and all that's humane builds a culture of peace on earth to sustain. Open the windows, tear down the walls, find no enemy, no hatred, from whence peace calls. Open windows, open doors, open ceilings, open floors, open skies, open eyes. See peace realized. Be the peacemaker, the paradigm changer. Now is the time to let your light shine, to be steady, to be sure in the power of peace. Amen.
Amen, Stephen. Thank you so, so much. I hope people will think and reflect on what you've had to say. I took a lot of notes today. I'm going to ask the first question, and I'm eager to see other people join in and the dialogue that you have invited. So, Stephen, I have a cluster of questions, and we can do another round of this. But so I've always been baffled, might be a word, or ignorant of the term "love thy enemy." And you alluded to this without using those particular words, but you've talked about forgiveness and purification. And you quoted Jesus twice, "Forgive them, they know not what they do." What if people do know what they're doing, and they are a model of your predatory example? Are there stages to forgiving your enemy? Can forgiveness be unconditional, or does forgiveness expect a responsibility on the person being forgiven to come halfway or to have some self-realization, in which case they deserve forgiveness? So that whole cluster, I have a separate question. I'll get back in line, but how do you address that in terms of your presentation today?
Well, I think that forgiveness is naturally a two-way street. However, it begins within each of us. And we have to begin also with forgiving ourselves for whatever trespasses, for whatever, quote, sins we may be guilty of, mistakes, missteps that we've made in our life. We have to realize as human beings, we are prey to mistake, missteps, and to creating misunderstandings. And so if we are to truly forgive, we must begin with forgiving ourselves. And in the course of the purification that I spoke about in the tactics of nonviolence, there were training programs where the individuals were learning that if you are beaten, if you are attacked, that you do not respond in kind by being in a reactive state of returning the violence. That will only escalate the situation. That will only add fuel to the fire. That instead, take the hit. And through the suffering, we grow. we learn not to return in kind what has been perpetrated upon us. Now, that's easy to say. That's easy to talk about in theory, harder to put into practice, harder to do. However, when we live in a world where there is imperialism, there is capitalism, predatory capitalism, there is militarism. I mean, the United States has 180 plus bases all over the world. And militarism is such a big part of our economic system. Almost 50% of our discretionary budget is spent on militarism. This is insanity. This is insanity. Yet, it is reality. And how do we overcome that? How do we overcome that? Well, to love thy enemy is to love thyself, because we have an enemy within ourselves as well. The enemy within ourselves is that part of us that thinks in terms of the predatorial, hatred, discriminatory way. If we can forgive ourselves and we can forgive others, Jesus said, turn the other cheek. The Sermon on the Mount is a basis of nonviolence for many of us. Difficult to do. Most difficult to do. But yet, it is the way. It is the way. Otherwise, we're condemning ourselves to being a violent species and caught in the violence forever. We have a different destiny. Human beings have a different destiny to fulfill on this planet. Is to be loving, is to be kind, is to be gracious, is to be merciful, is to be forgiving, is to be compassionate, to be caring. And it's difficult to live that way in a world where the predatorial predilection has been predominant for centuries and centuries and centuries. It's a tug of war. Human beings are caught in this tug of war between that sense of violence as a means of ending our conflict, solving our conflict, and another way. There is another way. Gandhi taught the other way. Jesus taught the other way. Martin Luther King taught the other way. And the other way has been used throughout history to make momentous change. It's still, James Lawson always talked about, we need a nonviolent revolution in our world. And that's what we need. That's what this presentation is really all about. Overcoming our tendency towards violent reactivity. It begins within each of us. It's a consciousness shift. It's a consciousness shift. And that consciousness shift, as we change ourselves individually, we're also changing the world. And as activists, we do what we can to import from ourselves, from our own presence, our own well-being of peace and health and justice and goodness, kindness, compassionateness. We bring that wherever we go in all our interactions.
Thank you, Stephen. So I've seen several hands. I'm doing them as I recall. I'm going to do Rick, Dr. Ruby, Rebecca, Carol Francis, and Don. But Rick, did you just take your hand down?
Oh, yeah, just to make a short, ask a short question.
Go right ahead.
Stephen, this was really instructive. I think, and I know Don's here. I feel like if I were to go to one of his meetings on changing how men or on men's anger issues, there'd probably be a lot that would resonate with me. And I'm wondering if you think that some of it might be from what I know Dennis Kucinich and I guess James Lawson also coined predatory capitalism. it seems like we're taught that a different aesthetic than a lot of people are taught and grown up with, especially in places like Europe and stuff like that, that we tend to be more competitive. We tend to make excuses about what we can get away with as far as our own process of making money in this country than we would in other places. And I think maybe part of that is because of the political structure in other countries, especially in places like Europe. And so I wanted to see if you thought that capitalism, that focus on capitalism and the way that we practice it here is part of that predatory instinct.
Absolutely, absolutely. Capitalism, by its very nature, is a breeding ground for greed and for self-aggrandizement and wanting to protect what you've gained and making others, classism. Predatory capitalism is the engine of classism, where you have those who are in control, like 1% controlling 90% of the wealth of the nation. So that's something that is encultured and has been part of the breeding ground of predatorialism in the United States and across the world. We are involved with a process of changing our consciousness away from that. And the way to be away from that, I mean, the movement of non-consumerism, the cooperative movement is very strong in places like Sweden and Japan and other nations. We can devise a better way than the capitalist system, which is top down. And it's the original story I talked about was the mothers sharing, telling the kids, let's learn how to share and stop the bullying. Predatory capitalism is bullying, the bullying for greed, the bullying for wealth, the bullying for position. And whereas the cooperative movement is really about building businesses where it's not for the top CEO to extract wealth for themselves, but it's a matter of sharing. The mothers were telling the children, learn to share, stop being the bully, learn to share. Sharing is the hardest thing for human beings to do, it seems, because we want. We're encultured to be predatorial and to be competitive and to take from the others what we want for ourselves, instead of saying, we can share this. We can share this. We can live together in this world in a better way.
Thank you. Let me go to Ruby.
Oh, Steve, I just want to thank you both, Steve. Really. This is one that I would like to pass on for ICUJP, so I'm going to bring it to the board, for us to be able to frame it, because this is what we're about. And when Stephen, we've been around together a long time. So, because I remember being at your house also. But when you say embracing love and purification of love and wisdom and, all these things, it's all colors. It's everything. It's the positive change for us to work together. And so I'm here with seniors now, temporarily. Well, we're supposed to be temporarily. Here I am. And I see so many of them lost. So many of them. And now people are coming to me. They're saying, oh, you think like this? Where are you getting this from? So this is something that we as a group can pass on. a group can pass that, yes, you're still needed. And I think that's one reason why I had planned to work the voting, and then they had signed me and everything. And then I said, oh, well, here I am. I hurt myself and I won't be able to. Yes, they're calling me. So I've taken the examination and I will be working the polls. So it's important for us as a group just to pass this on, what we're about. And that's what I want to say. Stephen, I just want to thank you again. And thank you for your joy and the music. And us to be able to get this video that you put also. I'd like to pass that video on.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruby. Was there a question?
No, you wanted
No,
a dialogue. A dialogue.
I'm sending you the love.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got it. I got it.
And I call it peace power.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I got it.
Wonderful. That video will be embedded in this program, and I'm sure separately, the video separately, Stephen and Rick can work on sending a link directly out to our lists.
Mhm.
I was moved by your comments on predatory capitalism because Dr. King saved one of his three evils as racism, militarism, and materialism. And I think that's exactly what he was getting at the time. So let me turn to Rebecca.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks so much. This talk really hit for me on many different levels. I think I became finally an unequivocal death penalty opponent when I became vegan. That wasn't too long ago, probably about 15 years ago. I was vegetarian for several decades before then. But I wanted to raise, one thing with the group and elevate. There is a movement to ditch dairy, and that's based on the premise that real how do they say it? Real feminists do not consume dairy because that industry, the dairy farmer industry, they rape the cows and falsely to inseminate them and then take their babies away. So it's something to think about. And then they don't let the baby cows drink their mother's milk because it's made for humans. So something to think about there. But my question is for you as a musician, that there's Alice Cooper raised this recent controversy that he thought that musicians shouldn't comment or endorse political candidates or because he said that's like pointing themselves as leaders, and they're influencing their followers, and they should just put their opinions in their music rather than endorse candidates. And it caught my attention because I see Stevie Wonder, and I see him at the DNC endorsing Kamala Harris, who is full in on supporting Israel. And then he's an ambassador of peace, and he has spent his life. Well, he has refused to do IDF concerts, and so I just see this contrast with him endorsed, and he's on the campaign trail for Harris Waltz right now. So I want to ask you, what do you think about that and what Alice Cooper raised there? I have a friend who said he spoke to Stevie Wonder, and that he said he didn't know. Stevie Wonder said he didn't know how supportive Kamala Harris was of Israel, but he's out there on the campaign trail for her.
Well, we don't know. It's true. We don't know. Every human being has a voice, and every human being in his or her own way is a leader. and everyone has a right to speak their mind and speak from their heart, and choose a candidate that they would support. It's just part of being a human being, I think. I don't think that it's right to say a musician should remain a musician or an athlete should remain an athlete and not respect the conditions that we find ourselves in politically in this world and express an opinion about that. If you have a platform, use it, and use it for the good. Use it for what you feel you are here to say, and speak from your heart, speak from your soul, speak truthfully as you can, and let it land. And if you take a position in the Israel-Palestine issue, for example, whatever your position is, you're a target. You can't take a position on that issue or on any issues without becoming a target of somebody else. So, but it's important that we express our opinions, that we have a say, that we let our voice be heard. And ICUJP provides that. We have a dialogue, and that dialogue is strong, and everybody has an opportunity to express their opinion and to be heard. And that's important for us. We're expressive communal creatures. We live together in this world. We have to speak our hearts.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, when someone signs up for any job or profession, they haven't disqualified themselves from their voice and speaking out. Now, it has consequences, as you say. I want to move right on. Take your hand down, Rebecca, so I don't get confused. Carol Francis.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it. I've been watching a lot of David Attenborough DVDs from the library, one after another. And I really appreciate the fact that you said, the predator animals, like the canines and the felines, they have to eat meat. They can't, their bodies are built to eat, like you said, raw meat. And I was just watching this video about this lioness who not only had to kill to survive, but had to kill for her cubs to survive. And that's, but we as primates are not canines, we're not felines, we're not built for meat eaters. And people who fight against vegetarianism, I always say, well, animals kill to survive. Well, we don't all. Anyway, Steve said that he asked, what do you do about the people who do know what they're doing? And how do you love your enemies? I think that it's really hard to think, how do you love Hitler? How do you love corporate leaders? How do you love Trump? How do you love these people who know well what they're doing? And I know that if we fight them out of love for the people they're hurting, and we fight them off. How do you love Netanyahu? I don't know. But if we do it out of love instead of doing it out of hate, it's just a whole lot better. And I just want to close by saying, when Francis went on the Third Crusade he went on the crusade to bring peace. He thought he'll convert the Sultan to Christianity, and then there'll all be peace. And of course, he got there and found out that the predators were the Crusaders, and the prey that were defending themselves were the Muslims. And realizing this really had a profound effect on him, and he had a profound effect on the Sultan. So, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I just want to add to that that when Gandhi was asked, what would you do in the case of Hitler? Gandhi said, it would take a little longer.
Yeah.
And that's because in the philosophy of satyagraha or nonviolence, you always recognize the divine or the good in the other person and in your enemy as well. You recognize that there is a divine spark in that person, that God is essentially good. God is goodness, God is love, God is peace, God is justice. And you recognize that this person is just and moved in the wrong direction, has been cultured and socialized, and is acting out a script that does not represent that divine self. And so you recognize the divine self in the other, and you can love that. And the problem is to make the choice of when to act in a defensive role. For example, in the preamble to the Declaration, to the Constitution of the United States, it says to establish justice and provide domestic tranquility and to provide for the common defense. It doesn't say the common offense. It doesn't say, intervene and export capitalism into other nations and oppress and deny. It says defense. And so the defensive aspect of that is to love thy neighbor, love thyself, and to see that love. And Gandhi would even say, you die for it, rather than giving yourself over to the violence and to the killing and to the mistreatment of others. Die for it. Give yourself to that. Devote yourself to that. That's hard for people to do. It's hard for people not to be reactive, not to react in kind. It takes great discipline. And that's what James Lawson was involved with, the training of individuals to not be reactive, to take the assault of the police and the dogs and the hoses, not react in kind, to show them that there is a better way to be in this planet. There's a higher calling that we have in this world.
Thank you, Stephen. We can learn so much. I just learned from you. Many of you know I'm a constitutional scholar, but the emphasis on a common defense in the preamble,
Right.
That's the first time I've heard that, and you've planted an important seed for me. I also want to say that of all sources of wisdom, my 6-year-old grandson, reflecting on Donald Trump, said he had a terrible father.
Yes.
My grandson thought beyond the headlines, beyond the political world, that this man, Trump, came from a terrible father. And
He was a Nazi sympathizer. Yes.
Yeah, that too. Anyway, I pushed myself to the end, but I want to take questions from Don and Anthony.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. That was really good. I love that song. My question is this: coming from a violent background where violence was part of my life, not anymore, and I coach men now about not being violent, but they come from a violent background, and it's
Right.
easier actually to be violent than it is to be peaceful. I've been finding out. And then I have men in my group who are the only reason why they go to my group is they don't get a third strike and go back to the penitentiary. How do you coach people to shift their mindset from it's easier to be violent and then to take that avenue of peace and to change their thought pattern on I'd be interested so it can maybe help me in my group. But thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. And I understand because I've also worked with veterans of war, veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress, and the reaction to the I think the natural reaction to a violent imposition on yourself is to respond in kind, to be violent back, and then it becomes an encultured reactivity that becomes so embedded in our consciousness and in our way of behaving that it becomes part of us, and it's difficult to work through that. Sometimes it requires a lot of therapy. Sometimes it requires engaging in a spiritual practice of meditation, of prayer, of being with others, other in your peer group, like what you're doing, Don, in leading a group. It's a peer group where you can openly express yourself in ways that you are able to share what's going on with you. And just that expression is helpful. It's very helpful. But we all need to find a practice that we can return to on a steady basis where we find a sense of peace, we find a sense of wholeness, we find a sense of the God presence within us that is there in every breath and every heartbeat. And I found that basically through yoga. I'm a yoga practitioner, a yoga teacher, and I find that yoga is very, very healing when you get beyond the trendy part of it. You know, there's a lot of trendy yoga, but there's also the deep, what I would call deep yoga, which, you know, comes from centuries and centuries of spiritual practice, meditation, pranayama, that is the breathing techniques, which are healing and invigorating and connect us to that life force that is divine, that is who we really are. And when we can touch that, and sometimes it's music. I mean, I'm a musician, so, you know, I find in music, in the nonverbal aspect of music, that kind of tonal upliftment that brings me to a divine self, that brings me to connectivity with each other and with what it means to be a human being capable of love, capable of compassion, capable of empathy, capable of caring for each other, and capable of not resorting to being violent. Now, in nonviolence, however, it has been, and it's a point of contention, that if someone is doing a shooting, for example, in a public venue, like we've seen, if perhaps you can take that person out so that you are actually protecting life and stopping the carnage from continuing, that is an act of nonviolence because you are protective and defending of life. Not your intention is to protect and defend rather than to harm and have intention of violent reactivity.
Thank you, Stephen. Don, offline, Rick and I would like to talk to you about your making a presentation here at a future Friday forum, a complete discussion of your work, what you've learned personally and in your work with other men. I think we'd all benefit from that.
I think we would, and that is a great thing, because what we've seen over the course of century after century after century is patriarchal dominance, whether it's Pharaoh, whether it's Alexander the Great, whether it's Caesar, whether, you know, it's Hitler, whether it's American imperialism. It's male-dominated patriarchal predatorialism. And that's something that men, you know, this is the age where the power of woman, the power of the feminine, the power of the woman to hold pregnancy and to make a body whole, that's a power that men don't possess. And so we need to cultivate within ourselves the feminine.
Excellent. We're coming almost to a close. Anthony?
Yeah, I really appreciated all of your passion and your brilliant insights. One of the things, though, that struck me was that rather lighthearted idea of Benjamin Franklin, that national bird should be the turkey rather than the eagle. And it touched me because for my birthday, I was given a bunch of chickens. And they've been delightful to have in my life. And I discovered that Jesus identified with a hen. When he was going to Jerusalem, he said, "Wouldst that I could gather up all your children as a hen gathers her chicks." So here he was, not identifying with the Roman eagle, but with the nurturing hen, and a female at that, of course. And I think that's very indicative of, I think, the deepest spirituality of Christianity is for the male to identify with the nurturing part of himself.
The mother.
By the way, there's only one reference to eagles in the gospel, and it's where the corpses are. That's where the eagles will be. So eagles are not just predators, they're scavengers. And they're not, and so that, from a Christian point of view, the Roman Empire was a scavenging empire, not something, Anyway, but thank you again for your amazing work. It's really inspired me, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to add, in terms of interfaith, e pluribus unum, which is a maxim of the United States, out of the many, one. What could be a more interfaith maxim than out of the many, one? That is really what America is. The challenge of America is that we're an aggregate of immigrants coming from all over the place, and we have to overcome the predatorship that this country was founded in, whether it was slavery or the demeaning of women or the destruction, the ethnic cleansing of Native Americans. This is our challenge today. This is our challenge today, out of the many, to truly reach a degree of social integrity that is e pluribus unum. Challenge, big challenge.
That's a wonderful thought to end on, Stephen. We're so grateful to you. It's another example across our 23 years that while we reach out to interesting speakers and people literally all over the world who have joined these Friday forums, some of the best has come from our own circle, and that we have amazing people that have been attracted to ICUJP, that are involved in ICUJP, and that we have so much to learn from them, and the kind of dialogue we had today, prompted by Stephen's thoughts and Carol Francis's reflection. So it's really, we should be proud, and I'm very grateful to Stephen. I had some questions about world history and why he has any optimism, given the history of wars and assassinations and palace intrigue and all the rest, and we'll save that for another time. Again, thank you, Carol Francis, for kicking this off, and to Stephen, thank you so much for everything you do every day. Rick, what do we have in the works in planning for next week?
Well, we're having a discussion on a couple different propositions around the unhoused in LA County and in California as well. And we have Daniel Tam that is scheduled to speak to us, and somebody new to me named Anthony Manousis, who will be speaking. I'll try and spell it for you. I'm
glad you can pronounce it. It's very hard.
That's a lot for me.
Yeah.
No, they're both going to be speaking on those propositions and work that we can do with the unhoused in this election. So that's great if you can join us.
Excellent. Please do join us next Friday, 7:30 a.m. In the spirit of everything we've talked about today. Be kind, be safe and be well. Enjoy your weekends, and we will see you next Friday. Thank you, everybody.